In the vast and storied history of video games, heroes have always been the stars of the show. We have guided countless brave knights, noble elves, powerful wizards on epic quests to save the world from encroaching darkness. They venture into treacherous dungeons, slay monstrous beasts, thwart the plans of some malevolent overlord, all for the sake of goodness and righteousness. It is a narrative as old as fantasy itself, a comfortable and familiar trope that has defined entire genres. But what if the script were flipped? What if instead of playing the valiant hero, you were the one commanding the darkness, the one digging the dungeons and the one unleashing the monsters? This was the revolutionary question posed by a small British developer in the late 1990s. The answer came in the form of Dungeon Keeper, a game that gleefully turned convention on its head. Released in 1997 by the legendary Bullfrog Productions, this title invited players to embrace their inner villain. Instead of saving the kingdom, your goal was to conquer it. You were not a hero descending into the depths. You were the master of those depths, meticulously carving out a subterranean lair from the cold, hard earth. Your job was to build a sprawling, functional, and lethally efficient dungeon, a place where evil could thrive and heroes would come to die. It was a strategy game, but one unlike any that had come before it, trading righteous crusades for deliciously wicked management. This was not simply a game about being evil for evil's sake. It was a complex and deeply engaging simulation of what it truly takes to be a successful overlord. Your minions weren't just mindless drones, they were creatures with needs, personalities, and rivalries. Imps had to be slapped to make them work faster. Bile demons needed a steady supply of chickens to eat, lest they get hungry and start munching on your other, more valuable creatures. Warlocks required libraries to research powerful spells, and trolls needed workshops to build deadly traps and sturdy doors. Managing this chaotic ecosystem of malevolence was the core of the experience, a brilliant blend of resource management, base building, and real-time tactical combat. The game's genius lied in its dark, satirical humor, which permeated every aspect of its design, from the sarcastic narrator to the quirky creature behaviors. It was a game that reveled in its own wickedness, encouraging players to find joy in the art of being bad. It challenged the very foundation of what a strategy game could be, proving that being the villain was not only a viable gameplay mechanic, but also an incredibly fun one. It was a bold declaration that sometimes it feels good to be bad. This radical departure from the norm set the stage for a cult classic that would be remembered and cherished for decades to come, defining a legacy of innovation and dark charm. Our trip today will go deep into the past of this famous game series, from how it first started in a wild way to how it's still loved today. We'll start by digging up how Dungeon Keeper began at Bullfrog Productions back in 1994. A small team at Bullfrog, led by Peter Molyneux, visionary and sometimes difficult, set out to make something totally new. They reused an engine from Magic Carpet to build a 3D dungeon viewed from above. They faced big technical limits, making an underground world on mid-90s PCs. That pushed their creativity to the max. The story of Dungeon Keeper begins not with a grand design document or a meticulous marketing plan, but with a simple, powerful idea in the creative crucible of Bullfrog Production Populous Theme Park. The concept began to take shape in November of 1994. Peter Molyneux championed the pitch of, what if you could be the master of your own dungeon? It was a direct inversion of fantasy lore. Instead of storming the castle, players would build it. Instead of slaying the dragon, they would feed it. The idea resonated with a team eager to push boundaries. A tiny core team took the spark. Project lead, programmer Simon Carter, lead artist Mark Healy, designer Barry Mead. They had to turn a high-level vision into playable reality, not just a game, a new perspective where villains were protagonists. To bring their subterranean world to life, the team needed a powerful technological foundation. The engine they chose had powered Magic Carpet. The engine could render deformable 3D terrain in real time. It let players raise the landscape. It let players lower the landscape. The Dungeon Keeper team saw an opportunity to repurpose that feature. Instead of raising mountains, players would be digging into the earth. Adapting the Magic Carpet engine was a stroke of genius, but not a simple copy and paste. Lead programmer Simon Carter set about heavily modifying the engine's core code. The goal was to give players a tactile sensation of carving their domain, one block of dirt at a time, while imps scurried to carry out orders. It enabled the possession spell, jumping into a creature's first-person view to walk the dungeon. That feature blew minds in 1997, giving a new perspective and tightening the bond with your minions. Section 3. Taming the Chaos. The art of simulation. The team's ambition was to create a believable dungeon simulation where every creature was more than just a simple combat unit. Simulating this complex web of behaviors was a monumental programming task, especially given the significant hardware limitations of mid-1990s personal computers. This system created a wonderfully chaotic and unpredictable environment, where managing your own forces was often just as challenging as fighting the enemy. The emergent behaviors of the creatures led to countless unscripted comedic moments. You might see a frustrated bile demon, having found the hatchery empty, decide to eat one of your precious imps instead. Mark Healy, the lead artist, famously designed the iconic Horned Reaper based on an ex-girlfriend, instilling it with a menacing grin and a terrible temperament that perfectly encapsulated the game's playfully sinister tone. The first time a player slapped an imp to make it work faster or dropped a chicken into a pen to appease a grumbling monster, they were experiencing a new kind of interaction. It was this intricate, often hilarious simulation of life within the dungeon that formed the game's enduring soul. Section 1. It's Good to be Bad. The Keeper's Handbook. When Dungeon Keeper clawed its way out of development and onto store shelves in June 1997, players were handed the keys to a kingdom of pure villainy. The game drops you into the role of a disembodied evil entity, shown as a skeletal magical hand cursor. Your first task: claim a dungeon heart, a pulsating crystalline core, the lifeblood of your dungeon. If it falls, you lose. From there, the world is your rock bed. You don't build structures, you command imps to dig, hollowing out corridors and creating chambers to your design. The core loop blends base building, resource management and real-time strategy. That gold pays your monstrous minions, who, like disgruntled employees, will get angry, leave or even turn on you. The other resource is mana, spent to cast powerful spells or possess a creature to see through its eyes. Dungeon Keeper stood out for its dark, pervasive humor, delivered by a sarcastic, cynical mentor voice. He'd sneer helpful advice like, "Your minions are fighting amongst themselves. You could pick them up, drop them in your dungeon prison, leave them to rot, or torture them in a torture chamber for information." The game encouraged creative cruelty, rewarding you not with righteousness but with the satisfying feeling of a perfectly executed evil plan. It understood, being the villain is just more fun. Section 2. A symphony of malevolence, creatures and contraptions. The soul of your dungeon was its inhabitants. Each monster was attracted by a specific room. A training room was essential for leveling up your creatures, turning a lowly skeleton into a fearsome warrior. The creatures themselves were brimming with personality. The Horned Reaper, a towering, scythe-wielding demon, became the game's unofficial mascot. Affectionately nicknamed Horny by the community, this creature was the ultimate weapon in your arsenal, capable of tearing through legions of heroes. Dark mistresses were sadomasochistic spellcasters who gained power from being tortured. Beyond your living minions, a successful keeper had to become a master of architecture and mechanical traps. The workshop, staffed by hard-working trolls, was the source of your defensive hardware. You could line your corridors with boulder traps that would crush unsuspecting heroes. This interplay between creatures, rooms and traps formed a complex and deeply strategic symphony of malevolence. You weren't just throwing monsters at a problem, you were conducting an orchestra of evil. Section 3. Digging deeper, expansions and enhancements. Just 5 months after release, they launched an expansion, Dungeon Keeper: The Deeper Dungeons. Aimed squarely at veteran players, it offered 15 new, incredibly difficult single-player levels. Alongside the expansion, Bullfrog released a free tech-enhancing update, the Direct 3D version. The patch gave the game a major graphical facelift. One significant long-term addition, the Level Editor. It let players craft their own single-player maps and multiplayer maps. Finally, multiplayer was key to keeping players engaged. Matches were frantic, chaotic affairs. Human opponents were cunning, unpredictable, and ruthless. Table of Contents, Part 4, Act 3, A New Reign of Terror. The sequel's promise: polished malevolence, gems, graphics and gameplay, refinement, not revolution. Section 1, A New Reign of Terror, the sequel's promise. In 1999, Bullfrog, now backed by Electronic Arts, unleashed Dungeon Keeper 2. This was no longer the product of a small, scrappy team. Development became a much grander affair, involving around 50 people. The goal, a more expansive and visually spectacular experience built from the ground up on a new, fully 3D engine. The dark, pixelated caverns of the original were replaced with smoothly rendered dungeons, where individual rocks crumbled and every creature was animated with newfound fluidity. The sequel also introduced a more structured, narrative-driven campaign. DK2 wove a central plot around the quest for portal gems. These artifacts were the keys to opening a portal to the surface world, allowing a full-scale invasion and the final triumph of evil. Supported by beautifully rendered CGI cutscenes between missions, these interludes fleshed out the world, showing bumbling heroes. The promise was not just more of the same, but richer, deeper, and more visually arresting. Section 2, Polish malevolence, gems, graphics, and gameplay. At its core, Dungeon Keeper 2 remained faithful to the gameplay that made the original a classic. The roster of creatures was updated. The sequel introduced the imposing Black Knights. New additions like the casino allowed your minions to gamble away their hard-earned wages, with the house, that is you, always winning. One of the most significant changes was the overhaul of the mana system. Mana was now generated by building special mana vaults on magical ground. This created new points of conflict on multiplayer maps, as rival keepers would often clash over control of these vital mana-generating hotspots. The fully 3D environment allowed for true multi-level dungeons. This verticality added a new dimension to dungeon design and tactical positioning. These refinements had all worked toward a single goal: to make the experience of being a dungeon keeper smoother, deeper, and more strategically engaging, polishing the original's raw diamond into a glittering, malevolent gem. Section 3. Refinement, not revolution. The prevailing sentiment upon Dungeon Keeper 2's release was that it was a masterclass in refinement rather than a bold revolution. For many fans, this was exactly what they wanted. The sequel was more accessible to newcomers, with a gentler learning curve and a clearer tutorial. Instead, Bullfrog focused on quality of life improvements. The user interface was cleaner, providing more information in a more intuitive layout. However, this play-it-safe approach also drew some criticism. A portion of the gaming press and some veteran players felt that the sequel lacked the raw, unpredictable spark of innovation. Some of the original's chaotic charm had been streamlined away. The high-risk, high-reward nature of the original Horned Reaper, for example, was toned down. Ultimately, Dungeon Keeper 2 successfully walked a very fine line. It stands as a textbook example of how to make a great sequel, delivering a rich, deep, and wickedly fun strategy experience that many still consider to be the pinnacle of the genre. It was the perfect evil, polished to a mirror shine. Section 1, The Critic's Verdict and the Cancelled Future. Upon its release, Dungeon Keeper was met with a chorus of critical acclaim. Reviewers were captivated by its audacious role reversal. Dungeon Keeper 2 received a similarly warm reception in 1999. With two titles, the future seemed bright. Work began on Dungeon Keeper 3. Project codenamed War for the Overworld teased in DK2's final cinematic. The plan? Take the battle out of the dungeon, full-scale surface conquest. Tragically, the vision was never realized. In the early 2000s, Electronic Arts shifted strategy. Electronic Arts cancelled Dungeon Keeper 3 in 2000, an abrupt, premature end, leaving keepers to wonder what might have been. Section 2, The Keeper's Enduring Lair. Re-releases and mods, the rise of digital distribution platforms, gave the series a new lease on life. For the most dedicated fans, a fan-made project known as Keeper FX became the definitive way to experience the 1997 classic. The volunteer developers behind the project have painstakingly fixed countless bugs and added support for higher resolutions and widescreen monitors. This has empowered a thriving community of modders and map makers to create an enormous amount of new content. The community has become the custodian of the series' legacy, a decentralized group of fans who have taken it upon themselves to maintain the dark flame. Section 3. The Echoes of Evil Legacy and Influence. Its core concept of inverting a traditional genre trope inspired other developers to challenge player perspectives. The game's specific mechanics also proved highly influential. The satisfying loop of digging out a base from raw earth was adopted by LEGO for 1999's LEGO Rock Raiders. The series championed indirect control and complex simulation. This echoes in simulation lineages like The Sims and RimWorld. Even decades later, the call for a true Dungeon Keeper 3 remains a persistent refrain among longtime gamers. Section 1. The Enduring Allure of Wickedness. Why does Dungeon Keeper still matter? The answer lies in its perfect fusion of three powerful elements: a revolutionary concept, a masterful simulation, and an unforgettable personality. It gave us permission to be the villain, and in doing so, it revealed just how much fun a little calculated cruelty could be. Furthermore, the games are a masterclass in the charm of controlled chaos. The joy was found in taming this beautiful mess. This intricate simulation created endless emergent stories and darkly comedic moments that have stuck with players for decades. Dungeon Keeper and its sequel stand as timeless classics, reminders of a time of bold experimentation and a celebration of the simple, wicked truth that it will always, always be good to be bad. The dungeon doors remain open, waiting for a new master.